I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. In this episode, we look at what it really takes to make a bill into law with Montgomery County Council member Sidney Katz, who successfully sponsored a new local government bill on electric scooters or e-scooters, the motorized version of the kid's toy that is now offered as an alternative to bicycles and electric bicycles, and available for rental in urban areas. You may remember from the old Schoolhouse Rock jingle, I'm a Bill, that for every bill that successfully becomes a law, there are many more that don't get anywhere near. The e-scooters bill made it. But what didn't? A real road safety bill, to take one giant example. 35 people have died on roads in Montgomery County in the year 2022, and this is only October. Not one of them because of scooters. But an e-scooter bill is what the county council passed. A road safety bill isn't even an idea, although there is unanimity on the council that road safety is the bigger problem. One reason why folks hate politics is because the smaller and sometimes marginal problem gets addressed first, while the bigger problem waits and waits. Of the 35 people dead on streets in Montgomery County, 9 were pedestrians, 3 bicyclists, 2 motorcycle riders, and the rest were in automobiles.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I got as far as Capitol Hill. Well, now I'm stuck in committee, and I'll sit here and wait while a few key congressmen discuss and debate whether they should let me be a law. I hope and pray that they will, but today I am still just a bill.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society moving precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from A Shrewdness of Apes, a Washington, D.C. area progressive rock band that has been a finalist for the local Whammy Awards in the hard rock category for a number of years. Ian Mabley on vocals and guitar, Chris Shadow on vocals and bass, and J.R. Franks on the drums. They are releasing a new acoustic EP called Embers at the Runaway on November 4th. More information on their website, asoaband.com. You're listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. In the news this week, we read deeply into a new audit report on MCPS. The Maryland Department of Legislative Services, an arm of the General Assembly, conducts audits of government agencies around the state. The last time the audit agency looked at MCPS was in 2016. The explosive information in the new audit report concerned systematic theft in the school district's transportation division that has already resulted in the removal of the department's director, Todd Watkins, and assistant director, Charles Ewald. The state's attorney is pursuing charges and recovery of the stolen money. Remarkable as it is, the use of fake accounts to funnel hard-to-track monies, such as refunds from vendors and damages vendors pay for contract deficiencies, were then used to make unauthorized purchases of between $500,000 and $1.2 million and suggests a well-planned scheme of theft. And more importantly, is consistent with a larger and persistent problem identified in the report. MCPS does not have a good system of monitoring contract performance, recovering liquidated damages, and could very well be allowing vendors to overcharge taxpayers. The problem with monitoring contract performance was identified in the 2016 audit as well, and it was repeated in the current audit. The current audit sampled 5 contracts to estimate $1.4 million in damages for delayed contracts by a combined 808 days. For 3 out of the 5 contracts, the Board of Education waived $200,000 of the liquidated damages and approved changes to the contracts that extended the completion dates by a combined 327 days. Although the contracts contained no such waiver provisions. The remaining $1.2 million in damages were not waived, and those were delayed by a combined 481 days. MCPS told the auditors that it does not routinely assess liquidated damages to avoid penalizing contractors, and did not have a formal policy to address processes for waiving liquidated damages. MCPS's bus camera system has long been under scrutiny and reveals contract monitoring problems as well. According to the DLS report, the initial bus contract was executed without competitive bidding and lacked sufficient details to identify or monitor MCPS's obligation to the vendor. In 2019, a contract amendment addressed these obligations, acknowledged that the vendor had recovered their investment but did not specify any amount. It also established the county's obligation for processing citations at $1.6 million and accepted a provision that MCPS could not henceforth require the vendor to provide any records concerning the cost of installation, operation, or maintenance of the bus camera system. The 2019 amendment divided revenue between the vendor and the county at 60-40. MCPS did not provide any justification for this revenue distribution. As of June 2021, MCPS had already paid the vendor $21.9 million, and the county had received $4.8 million from bus camera tickets. Worryingly, MCPS's meal uptake is down, declining 57% from 17.1 million meals in 2019 to 7.4 million meals in 2021. The pandemic was partially to blame, of course, but the drop-off is truly dramatic and should concern MCPS leaders. The report had 5 cybersecurity-related findings that were redacted. Cybersecurity and student privacy in school districts is fraught everywhere, and the redactions suggest that public knowledge of the problems might aggravate the issues. Student privacy activists should be paying attention. The report mentioned continuing issues with the management of service activity funds in schools, which total about $25 million, and with MCPS's formal relationship with MCPS Foundation, which controls several million more in collected funds. Of note, the audit report has said that the big county contract for 300 electric buses for MCPS does not seem to have any problems. The latest report on the electric bus contract suggests delays in bus delivery, which is part of a global problem of supply chains in the electric vehicle industry. MCPS is buying more diesel buses as a stopgap. You're listening to I Hate Politics. I am Sunil Dasgupta. I'll be back with Montgomery County Council member Sidney Katz, who sponsored a local bill on e-scooters recently. Sidney Katz, welcome to I Hate Politics.
Thank you very, very much. It's good being here, and I don't hate politics, and I enjoy being here. So all of that is good for me.
Let's talk about the e-scooters bill that you sponsored recently.
Yes.
Can you speak to the origins of the bill? What is the problem you were trying to solve? When did you start doing? Start on the bill?
It started out about 3 years ago, something like that. And of course, that the pandemic got in the middle of much legislation, especially this one. This one was not a front burner type of legislation. It started out as a bicycle and e-scooter registration. In the middle of all this, we pulled back on the e-scooters, but bicycles, which was I guess at that point was a mandatory registration in the county. The county changed the legislation that said you don't have to register bicycles. You can, but you don't. It's not mandatory. And because of that, we decided that government's confusing enough. We don't need two pieces of legislation that's going to basically do the same thing. So we took bicycles out of this legislation, but it was for safety reasons. I'd gotten some concerns from people that said that they had seen people who they believed were being unsafe, weren't parking their scooters in a way that they were blocking sidewalks, etc. And I had seen one time. This goes back couple years ago, but I had was stopped at a traffic signal, and a young person, I have no idea whether they were 18 years old or 16 years old or 20 years old. The older we get, the younger everybody seems to appear. But they literally were flying down the road on an e-scooter in traffic. Not wearing a helmet. I mean, it was one of those situations that you just stopped and thought, oh my gosh, I hope the person makes it, type of thing. And they did. They got through the part of traffic that I saw them doing. But I thought then, you know what, this is something that more and more people more than likely will use as a form of transportation over time. And if we can get in front of it and educate people using it, and in most cases it's a younger person, not always, educate them on the what's the safest way to do and where to park them and all of those sorts of things. Wear a helmet, and if you're in this legislation, if you're if you're less than 18, but you have to be more than 14 in order to use an e-scooter, not a toy, but an e-scooter, then let's do that. This is not a money-making idea. This is a safety idea.
How many people do you think told you about this?
I would say it was certainly by the dozens. It wasn't thousands. I don't want to give that impression. But this legislation has been interesting. As I say, it stopped and started. So that in itself was something to think about. I probably have had more comment during the last several weeks before the legislation was passed than I did prior to that.
So when you started 3 years ago, how many people demanded that you go ahead and please find us a solution to a problem
the word
seemingly
demanded is not fair. No one demanded any of this.
How many people asked? I mean,
I would say at least by a dozen. But first off, I had a couple of people, and I'd say a dozen or so. When I would see someone, they asked me. In fact, I remember being in Giant, and someone came up to me and said, "Sidney, it's a good thing I bumped into you. Let me ask you, is there legislation about e-scooters?" And I said, I'd have to double check. I didn't know off the top of my head. And they said because they had seen what they considered to be an unsafe situation, and that they felt that people needed to be educated about them.
How many people have been injured or died on scooters in Montgomery County? I assume the deaths will be counted, but do you count injuries is the question.
I don't know that answer. And maybe that is something that
so that's my question, right? We don't know the answer to the extent of the problem of e-scooters. And yes, there was a compelling need to get ahead of it. We've had 35 road deaths in Montgomery County. I think 9 pedestrians, 3 bicyclists, the rest on vehicles, I think 2 motorcyclists, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that is correct, yeah.
And this has been going on year after year, year after year, year after year. Just prior to your passing the e-scooter bill, you heard a Vision Zero presentation.
Yes.
Which did not at all include anything on e-scooters. So my question is, why do you put your time and effort and political capital to do something that is, a good idea, but not urgent, over something that needs to be done yesterday and last year?
Well, first of all, I don't know how much political capital was put on this. Someone gave an idea, and we certainly.
Who is this someone?
The people who had brought it to me originally. I don't have names, but when someone gives me an idea, I ask staff to look into it and see what. But
a lot of people have demanded. A lot of people have demanded action on road safety more generally, which has not been forthcoming from the county council.
We are in agreement on that. We certainly have put resources.
But so why waste time on e-scooters, which are, we don't know, we don't count. It's not that prevalent. We don't know anybody that has died on an e-scooter.
But why would you?
We don't know anybody. But we know
for someone to die before you take action.
That's a very good point. Provided you have already done something about those that are already dying.
But it's not only if one or the other. It's all.
But you're not doing the other.
Well, we are attempting to do that, as you know.
Well, attempting is one thing, and doing it is another. What specifically has been done on the road deaths that will allow you time?
The Vision Zero is, as you know, the Vision Zero. We just the county council just received an update from the
and it had nothing to do with e-scooters.
But why would it? Though it could have included e-scooters,
but it didn't, because it's not important. It's like
At
looking
this,
for your lost keys under the lamppost. You can do it because it can be done.
no, if you didn't have legislation about e-scooters, we didn't have if we didn't have concerns about every part of pedestrian and bicycle and motor vehicle fatalities and injuries. This should be a part of that come in the future. And candidly, the success for this piece of legislation, as I said in the very beginning, is not anything but education. If there were never any fatalities or injuries from e-scooters, to me, that would be a great success.
You are faced with a real life-threatening situation on our roads.
Absolutely.
And you have passed a bill about something we don't really even know what the impact is because we don't even count them.
This does not take the place for any other piece of legislation.
But it does. It takes time, and there has not been legislation on road safety. It's a question about priorities.
And we need to do it all. It's not if we did this, we couldn't do something else. We need to do it all.
The fact of the matter is that the council has not come up with significant road safety measures for a long time. I mean, there's been some reduction in some speed limits in some roads. There's some, we invest too little in our sidewalks. There is not enough emphasis on, safe routes to school. There's just a plethora of things that need to be done. And the one thing that gets done is where we don't even know if it's a real problem.
It's not just the one thing that's gotten done. I think
what else?
We're
but
not,
on road safety itself, what have been the county's measures to help?
There again, on the Vision Zero update, there was we have a person who was dedicated on the county exec's staff to work on these issues, to come up with solutions, who are experts on that, to work with the various departments. And that does not mean that we should stop with just one person working on these various issues. We are extremely concerned about it. No one wants anyone on any type of vehicle to be hurt or to lose their life.
I agree. Nobody wants it. But the thing that we do something about is the thing that we need to do least about. The thing that we need to do more about, we say we have hired people and they are coming up with a plan and we will see in the future. That gets, put back while
nothing was put back. I did not at any time say that this would take a priority over any other pice of legislation.
But it has, because you haven't passed anything on the road safety
That doesn't
side.
mean it took a priority. This means this one was easier to write. And
so you wrote the thing that is easier over the thing that is harder, and you're saying that's not the priority.
It was easier to have this drafted, to come up with this solution, rather than what they're working on now.
Well, let me ask you what government is about then. Is the government about doing the easy things?
No, government is about doing the right
thing. But that's what you did in this case, right?
No, what government did was the right thing.
So let's talk about the details of the bill, right?
Okay.
So the bill says at some point, and I would like you to clarify this, is that if you have more than 2 scooters, you need to register them. Now, you said earlier that to me separately that this does not apply to individual owners at all. Right. That registration is only required for e-scooter companies. Does the new text of the bill make that clear, or how is that taken care of?
It does.
The other part that was sort of striking to me was the reflector issue. The bill says that a e-scooter is differentiated from a toy scooter. One of those measures of differentiation are reflectors. If a toy scooter were to have reflectors, it may be seen based on the wording of the law as a e-scooter subject to the requirements of the law that you just passed. Can you clarify that?
The law itself says that there's e-scooters and toy scooters, and I guess that in itself gets confusing. But an e-scooter has to have reflectors, can go up to 15 miles an hour, and you have to be no younger than 14 in order to do it. From 14 to 18, a person would have to wear a helmet and be fined if they don't, or be stopped if they don't.
Okay, so on the reflector issue, the implication of the law, as I read it, is that if there are reflectors on a toy scooter, right, then that toy scooter becomes a real scooter. Now,
no, that's not accurate.
Well, okay. How do you propose to enforce the speed limit on scooters and toy scooters?
Well, hopefully no one will use this in an unsafe manner. And if someone believes that whether it be police could be involved, it's also by concern. If someone calls and says that they believe someone is driving faster than 15 miles an hour, or whatever the speed would be, then that would be by complaint.
You said something about people reporting to the police if somebody is riding an unsafe scooter.
The idea is we want Montgomery County to be as safe as it can possibly be. And if that means if you see something, say something. If my neighbor happens to, and I don't have one, I don't want to cause any of my neighbors a concern here. But if one of my neighbors was doing something unsafe on an e-scooter, first off, I would go over to that neighbor and say, by the way, either you or your child or your teenage child is using this scooter, and really it's pretty unsafe. You really should be careful. Let me know, to give them an educational type of opportunity. I think that goes a long way, and I think it would go a long way in this case as well.
Do you get along with your neighbors?
I do.
Do you know cases where neighbors don't get along?
Of course.
Do you think in those cases this might be wrongly used?
I don't know. I think if there's a case where neighbors don't get along, there again, we're talking the great possibilities. But if there's a case that the neighbors don't get along, then they would contact the government to
the police. You mean
their neighbor?
So they will call 911
or Department of Transportation or whoever's or the company that rented it.
What does your law say?
The law, it would be the contact the Department of Transportation, or you could call.
So they should call 311. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, I guess. I mean, that would be the start for that. And as I say, at this point,
they should not call 911.
First of all, I don't, unless it's something that's that dramatic, that's unsafe. I mean, if someone is, to the incident that I saw, if they saw someone in the middle of the street going 20 miles an hour, what they believe.
But how do you know it was 20 miles an hour?
You don't.
Exactly. So how do you call the police and say there's a kid flying through traffic right now going at, I believe above 15? How do you know all of that?
You don't.
So you just report it?
It would be the same thing as if that same person were on a motorcycle and went through the middle of, in an unsafe situation, went through the middle of traffic, almost strike somebody.
And the police responds to that?
The police, if someone would call the police, and say that this is where I'm at, whatever it is, street, then I believe that a police officer would respond. It's not red light and siren unless it's, something that's of greatest danger, but imminent danger. But I believe that in this day and age, you could have that. Having said that, the laws that we have, let's figure out, we're talking about e-scooters, and we're spending a lot of time talking about e-scooters. But in addition to this type of discussion, we need to talk about what would be the best legislation. I'm happy to sponsor it. What would be the best legislation to get us to that vision zero? And that is a much deeper and thorough discussion that needs to be had.
Okay. I'm only bringing up the e-scooters because you passed a bill. Yeah, let's talk about another part of it.
Okay.
Helmets, right?
Yep.
Your helmet requirement.
Yep.
Did you hear the racial equity statement on that? And what did it say?
Well, I don't have that in front of me, so I don't want to quote something that I don't have in front of me.
But the gist of it.
It was that they were concerned that there would be someone would be stopped who was not wearing a helmet because of a racial profiling. I'm putting words in.
No, I think you're right.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it said.
But however, what we did change for this law, so to make certain that this becomes an educational and safety issue rather than just any other type of issue, that first off, that the fine that the police officer or whoever could not charge the person with a fine. They could, first time, they could give them a warning and tell them that they needed to. And it's not mandatory other than for somebody between the ages of 14 and 18 for e-scooters. It's not beyond 18. You don't have to, though it's certainly a very, very good idea that you wear a helmet. It's not mandatory.
Well, two issues with that.
Okay.
So, first of all, how does anybody know that somebody is 16 or 17 or 18 or 15? Some kids are large, some kids are small,
Right.
and yep. So what kind of education are you really giving via the bill if you are encouraging this kind of, oh, that kid, I need to call the police on that kid because he's not wearing a helmet?
Well, first off, there again, if you know the child, then you would know perhaps their age. There is that possibility.
If you know the child, it's very unlikely you're calling the police.
Well, you just mentioned before someone, didn't get along with their neighbor, and hopefully everyone always does. But...
Well, so, I mean, if you consider that situation, I'm really concerned about that kind of, sort of encouraging people to say, there are neighbors that don't like Black neighbors, and our history is full of that. And they use this law to say, oh, this kid, is riding too fast, riding with a helmet.
Well, I don't agree with you. I believe that if this makes it safer than it does, if there becomes an issue with what you're suggesting, then that would be something that we would have to work on. However,
but if it makes it better is a hypothetical, because it was already the case that scooters were not killing anybody.
That I'm aware of. That is correct.
When you take time
yep.
to pass a bill
yep.
that seemingly about which we have no data, to be able to say, well, this would be better to have or not. There has not been one scooter death in Montgomery County.
And meanwhile, may there never be.
Yeah. And meanwhile, there have been 35 road deaths, 9 pedestrians, 3 bikers, 2 motorcyclists, right? All of them are dead on streets that are in Montgomery County. And those deaths seem to continue and increase. And those are not prioritized. Instead, we're doing an e-scooter bill that is sort of beside the point.
I hear what you're saying. We're not going to agree that it's either or. I'm not going to give in on that. It is not. It is not either or. And we need to do it all. I've said that continually through this and other issues as well. I hope that we never have an e-scooter fatality or anyone hurt. And if we do not have someone who has ever been hurt, that to me is a success. That does not mean that this bill was the best bill that's ever been crafted, but that to me would be a success. Having said all of that, I am certainly always open to any other suggestions to try to keep the public as safe as we possibly can on all issues, not just this issue, but on all issues, not just traffic, but on all issues. And if we can do that, I believe that would be a success as well. I stand ready to work, to continue to work on issues that will keep the public safe.
Sidney Katz, thank you for coming on I Hate Politics. I hope you'll come back, sometimes even before you've passed these laws.
If we can take a couple extra seconds here, Sunil.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you did not contact me. You weren't aware of it, you said. We certainly went through public hearings. We certainly have tried our best to inform the public of all of this. We contacted the for-profit companies who are leasing e-scooters. We tried to do it all.
Well, actually, that's not true because you didn't contact Action Committee for Transit.
Well, I don't know that we contacted each individual.
Well, no, it's not in. Well, it's Action Committee for Transit has existed in Montgomery County for what now, 30 years, and they have been at the forefront of pedestrian safety work for, as you know, for many, many years, doing ghost shoes and ghost bikes memorials.
Yes, and I've been to their.
They were not contacted.
Yeah,
they were not contacted.
Well, I don't remember that part. So if we didn't, I'm sorry. But I do know, you read enough news media, et cetera. I do know that there were certainly groups that were not opposed, that were okay with this trend.
Which groups were okay with this?
Well, I don't remember. I don't have it in front of me.
Well, I don't think that, I think this bill was sort of done without too much input.
It was public in all fairness.
I'm sure it's public. I am not questioning the public nature of it, but without the input. There are lots of, county government does a lot of things. Some of it people get involved, some of it they don't. Some of it we know, some of it we don't. And that's in itself a different, a question of how government and public work together.
Right.
But to say that there was a widespread input on this, I don't believe.
I'm not saying it was widespread. I'm saying that we certainly attempted to get as many people as we could through public hearings and public discussions.
Sidney Katz and I talked for another half an hour, but you get the gist of it.
He lives alone, concerned not of peers. His mind is conjuring, nothing else matters.
What lessons can we draw from my conversation with Montgomery County Council member Sidney Katz about how a bill really becomes a law? Schoolhouse Rock wasn't incorrect. Only a few bills become law. But Schoolhouse Rock didn't quite distinguish which bills move up and which don't even make it to the idea stage. Politics is called the art of the possible. You get done what you can, things for which there is seeming consensus, or to put it more accurately, things against which there is no seeming opposition. Bills that are passed sometimes do little about the actual problem people face, but politicians have something to show for their efforts. It is worth noting that Sidney Katz was the sponsor of the e-scooter bill, but there were other members of the County Council's Public Safety Committee who supported the bill, and it was okayed by the full County Council. I recall last year, Council member Craig Rice introduced a panhandling bill which also promised to deliver public safety by criminalizing the panhandler. That bill did not pass because there was opposition. The e-scooters bill passed because there did not seem to be any opposition before the fact. As Sidney Katz asked, "Why didn't I call him earlier?" If anything, this is a statement about the power of good public participation in the political process outside of elections. A truly robust system would pick up on this opposition, but it would also make it more difficult to pass other laws if this opposition was regularly allowed. How much public participation should be allowed is a big question in politics. A key demographic the e-scooter bill tries to legislate are children. If you are not 14, don't ride an e-scooter. If you are between 14 and 18, only ride while wearing a helmet and stay below the 15 miles an hour speed limit. These are all seemingly nice to have things. From Sidney Katz's point of view, his primary goal is education, to the point that it is very unclear how enforcement of the new e-scooter law will actually occur. We don't know if we should or should not call 911 to report an e-scooter violation. And remember, we don't allow this demographic group, people below the age of 18, to vote. So their displeasure is by definition less valuable. Lastly, Sidney Katz is not exceptional in the way most politicians set their priorities. He and his fellow politicians try to do the best by the people that elect them. But all politicians live within networks. Now, politicians will have significantly larger networks than civilians. But even these large networks are by definition limited. The priorities they set are defined by the networks they live in and refer to, and this is the network that produced an e-scooter bill but has not produced an omnibus road safety law, which is desperately needed. So, to expand on the Schoolhouse Rock jingle, the law that didn't make it was the bill that didn't make it, was an idea that didn't make it. That's all for this episode. You've been listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. Music for this episode comes from A Shrewdness of Apes, a Washington, D.C. area progressive rock band that has been a finalist for the local Whammy Awards in the hard rock category for a number of years. Ian Mabley on vocals and guitar, Chris Shadow on vocals and bass, and J.R. Franks on the drums. They are releasing a new EP, an acoustic EP, called Embers at the Runaway on November 4th. More information on their website at asoaband.com. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone who might want to, please email us at ihppod@gmail.com or reach out on Twitter at ihppod. I hope you'll subscribe and share the show as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.
Search for fossil power.